Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Steven Universe Retrospectives, and today we're going to be discussing episodes 135 and 136 of Steven Universe, Sadie Killer and Kevin Party, and as I promised last week, these episodes are the ones that finally wrap up the whole Steven and Connie separation arc, so to speak. So, yeah, well, it doesn't start out that way. In fact, for the first episode, it's kind of a filler episode, so to speak, but it's still a good one. Case in point, getting tongue-tied, let's just get into it. First up, let's talk about Sadie Killer. And the episode actually opens with Steven going to the Big Donut to pick up an order of donuts. And it's quite a hefty order, as it's quite a variety of donuts, different variety of drinks. Basically, all of it just seems kind of unreasonable. And on top of that, he's paying for the order utilizing various forms of currency, including cash, change, credit cards, and checks. It's just kind of a clusterfuck. And to top it all off, Sadie is kind of working alone. And basically, ever since Lars left, she's kind of been working double time at the Big Donut trying to cover his shifts. Something that she admits she's used to because Lars was a slacker. But at the very least, even when he was a slacker, things were still easier because Sadie at least could talk to him while she worked. But now that he's not here, she's just by herself and working double time. So she's just kind of in over her head and has really no idea what she's doing, to the point where she's very much exhausted, not which does not help by the fact that someone apparently keeps stealing all the napkins from the store so that she has to keep restocking them. And that person, it turns out, is Steven, because he apparently likes going overboard. My point is this: she's overworked and needs a break, which thankfully Steven kind of provides her, as Steven admits that he's getting this order because he's kind of sort of gotten into a band. You see, Buck, Dewey, Jenny, and Sour Cream have formed a little band with Steven, and basically Steven kind of happily joined it because, well, he kind of needs an outlet, something normal-ish or down to earth that isn't something big or life-threatening or gem-related or something. It's just basically meant to be his escape, so to speak. And, well, he's happy to do it, even if they haven't really done anything with the band. And as such, he suggests that maybe Sadie could stop by for one of their practices or so forth. They're doing it right out of Sour Cream's garage. Maybe she'll have fun. And Sadie, well, still clearly more dedicated to the job, says that she'll at least want to do it. That she can probably pop in. And Steven says that's good before he takes a bundle of napkins and goes to the garage. And so, as such, we then cut over to the garage as we see Steven and co. trying to think of a sound, so to speak, as they're just kind of playing with their instruments. But before they can even play a note, Buck ends up running up and reveals that he's gotten the band a gig, which not everyone, the band isn't exactly happy with, because, well, they have nothing to their name. They don't have a name, they don't have a track set, and they don't even have any songs to put on said track set. They are a blank slate in the highest regard. So they really don't know what they'll be presenting to the crowd of this gig if they don't even know what they are themselves. So they begin all brainstorming what to do, but sadly they can't really settle on anything. And no matter what they all try, and no matter how much they discuss everything, and no matter how much they discuss, ultimately they're just kind of coming up blank. And they continue on this for several hours, to the point where when dusk finally comes, they decide, okay, maybe we should just wrap this up. It's at this point when Sadie finally shows up, as it took her longer to close up the Big Donut than she thought. But she's disappointed that she learned that she missed the practice altogether. However, they still invite her to come for their next one, and she lets them know that if she has enough time off of work, she'll happily join them. And so she leaves again, but Steven notes that she still seems very overworked. As such, when the next day rolls around and Sadie comes home after another long shift, she finds that Steven and the teens have followed her home. It's not as creepy as it sounds. Or maybe exactly as creepy as it sounds. I don't know. My point is, they want to hang out with her, and while Sadie is flustered because she wasn't expecting company and her room's a mess, she's like, you know what, okay, yeah, you can come on in. As such, they all come piling into her room, and basically they all are once again trying to figure out what their sound will be, what they're going to do, and they all try to get comfortable in Sadie's room, but unfortunately, in the midst of trying to get comfortable, they discover something. Because you see, while Sadie was cleaning up, she stored something under the covers of her bed. And when Buck wants to sit down on the bed, when Buck wants to sit down on the bed because the spot he sat down on was too cramped, he discovers that what she hid was her collection of scary movies, which, the teens are actually are pretty cool with. So then one of the movies actually is one that Jenny knows, and she suggests maybe they should go watch that. So they end up doing it, and while Steven's a little hesitant to actually watch it because it's Steven, the teens actually are having fun. And while Steven does try to get them to go towards finding their own sound, they're like, well, actually, I kind of like the sound of this. And from there, the band starts actually making music as they play tunes kind of similar to the track of the scary movie they're watching, and they're all vibing with it. Even Steven managed to find his own place in it, but there's missing one thing: they need lyrics. And Sadie starts providing lyrics. And it's here we actually get a song for the episode. I think it's called The Working Dead, but don't quote me on that. But the point is this: the whole crux of the lyrics that Sadie provides is that she works a crappy 9-to-5 job that she feels overworked at, that she feels like that she's putting all of her time and effort into, but ultimately it's just draining her, and how ultimately she just wants to break free and just do what she wants. Although in the case of the song, she implies that she is a zombie that wants to eat her customers' brains. But yeah, the more Sadie sings the song, the more she does get into it, to the point where she actually starts vibing with the music, gets her own costume in the form of putting on a jacket and eyeliner, and even takes a donut that she brought home from work and pretends it's a brain as she just gobbles it up. Sorry, Chinny came in. Aww. But yeah, basically everyone loves her. Everyone loves the sound they made, and they're happy with the lyrics that Sadie provided. So much so that they offer her a spot on the band as Sadie Killer, asking if she wants to be their frontliner for the band, which Sadie is flattered by, but she still wants to prioritize work, so she says she can't do it, which the band is disappointed with, but they try and adapt. Unfortunately, though, that's easier said than done, as the next day Steven comes into the Big Donut to talk to Sadie, and, well, without Sadie there, they can't really capture the essence of the whole working a job you hate kind of thing. So they really can't get the scariness down. And so Steven does ask Sadie if she wants to reconsider, but again, Sadie talks about how she kind of wants to stay here. Like, yeah, she understands that the band is something big and unexpected and interesting and nice, but right now she kind of feels like she needs the normal. And yeah, it feels tedious and draining, but it's kind of like a good kind of draining, at least how she puts it. I can't do the words that she says justice, but put simply, she mentions how, but the point is this: it's something stable, it's something familiar, and yes, it feels like it's sucking the life out of her, but it's something familiar, so to speak. When considering all the weirdness, you can kind of get that, although it's still clear that it's draining her dry, and even the wording she provides when she describes it, Steven almost considers poetry, and he decides that he could probably use that for the band, which Sadie's okay with, but ultimately Steven understands why she doesn't want to join, so he says that he'll find a way that they can make it work and leaves. Although Sadie's still clearly is still kind of pondering on this. As such, Steven meets up with the other teens later, and while they're all still disappointed that Steven couldn't convince Sadie, they decide, well, fuck it, we'll just make do with what we can. So they all pile into Jenny's delivery car van as they go and try to get to their gig. However, as they're on the way, they end up getting kind of lost, so they have to stop and try and find the map. But as they do, they hear Sadie calling out to them. When they look behind them, they see her running up to the van as she says that she can make it. She can make it to the gig. She can join them, which they're all happy with. And even Steven's like, oh, thank goodness, because he would have been the frontliner in any way. And part of the reason why they didn't want to do him is because, in Buck's own words, Steven can't help being cute just as much as Buck can't help being cool. So I kind of find that amusing. But Sadie even further emphasizes that she not only can make it to the gig, she can make it to the next gig, and band practice, and the band practice after that, and the next gig after that, and just goes on and on and on. And they're like, well, what? It's like, well, what do you mean? Don't you have to worry about your job? And Sadie ends the episode by exclaiming that she quits. So, yeah, that's where that episode ends. But I promised a resolution for Steven and Connie, and we get that resolution in Kevin Party. Because as I mentioned all the way back in the Dewey Wins episode, Lion's been missing for a few episodes. As, like I said, he goes out with Connie, and then he just never came back. And, well, Steven's finally beginning to notice that his Lion is not back, so he starts putting up flyers all around Beach City because, well, he's worried about him. However, as Steven's in the middle of putting up flyers, an unexpected guest arrives to kind of crash the party. Kevin, the douchebag guy, who stops his car right in front of Steven, and then just nonchalantly asks, "So you free Saturday?" Of course, Steven's learned his lesson and wants nothing to do with Kevin, so he tries to ignore him, but Kevin keeps pushing and pushing because he wants Steven to be there, because he wants Steven to come to his party. Well, sort of. Kevin fully admits that he wants that he's hosting that while he's hosting a party, and even admits that it's at his parents' estate somewhere. He can't the part of the reason why he wants Steven to come is because he wants cool teens there, and he's not referring to Steven. He does not like Steven, and Steven's a preteen, and that Kevin thinks is like 7. No, who Kevin really wants at the party is Stevani. After all, Stevani while Kevin thinks of himself as the creme de la creme of the cool kids, he's a weenie. But when it comes to Stevani, they are cool. They don't give a shit about anything. They're good at dancing. They're good at driving. Basically, they improve everything just by being there, and Kevin wants his party to be the bomb, so to speak. So he wants Stevani there, which means he needs Steven there. Unfortunately, though, Steven admits that he's not going to do it, because after all, since he and Connie are kind of estranged at this moment, Stevani can't exist, since after all, they only exist as long as Steven and Connie are together. So, yeah, he thinks that it's going to be a bust, especially considering that Steven still believes he's in hot water with Connie. As such, Kevin kind of grumbles at this and even kind of talks about how, shit, and I went to the trouble of inviting that other kid too, but it doesn't matter. So Steven picks up on that and is like, wait, you actually talked to Connie? Which, yeah, Kevin confirms he did indeed talk to Connie, and it turns out he pulled the same trick on Connie. As it turns out, he went to her first and essentially gave the same treatment to her that he's giving to Steven now, saying that he wants Stevani there, and that he needs Steven and Connie there for Stevani, and then even told Connie Steven's going to be at the party too, much like how he's telling Connie here. Which, a funny thing I like is that while Steven's able to figure all that out by himself, he still falls for it hook, line, and sinker just because he wants to see Connie. As such, Kevin does tell Steven that, yeah, he can come to the party, but only on the condition that Stevani will be there. As such, he gives Steven the address, finally learning his name is also Steven, funny thing, apparently he thought his name was Clarence, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I know he didn't think his name was Steven. But point is, Steven knows the time and knows the place, so Kevin just drives off, and the episode then cuts ahead to the night of the party as Steven finally arrives. And yeah, it's a cool kid party, as we see just teenagers standing around, socializing, vibing, chilling in hot tubs, just having a good time, so to speak. And so Steven managed to finally arrive, and he's wearing the shirt that Connie gave him for his birthday. And the instant that Kevin sees Steven, he starts berating him, asking him why he was so late, to which Steven says he got lost going up Kevin's driveway. But basically, Steven's just kind of wondering where Connie is, and ultimately, well, he does kind of get an answer, as when he looks in the party, he sees a bunch of teens taking pictures of the lion, which at first Steven thinks that Kevin has the lion, but Kevin confirms that he doesn't. But yeah, the lion steps aside, and we see Connie, who it turns out has kind of gotten a slight makeover since the last time Steven saw her, as she's actually gotten a haircut. It's actually kind of cute, which even Steven thinks is cute, which even Steven admits. But yeah, Steven is just as nervous now as he was in the previous episodes. He doesn't know how to talk to Connie. He doesn't know how to confront her. And on top of that, she's socializing with other teenagers. He's wondering if she's happy without him. She's moved on and all that crap. But Kevin tries to calm Steven down because, again, he wants Stevani at the party, and he can't have Stevani if Steven and Connie aren't a couple anymore. So Kevin thinks that maybe this is a good opportunity for them to patch things up. So of course, Steven believes that he can just do that by going to talk to Connie, apologizing, letting her know he fucked up, and they'll make everything better. But Kevin tells Steven not to do that. He thinks it's desperate, especially since she's clearly having a good time right now. So he thinks that the best way to get Connie's attention is to play it cool, so to speak. Be nice. She's clearly moved on with her life, so just try and show that he's moved on too. Try and look cool, which, what I love is that Kevin, to try and make Steven look cool, ends up giving him a jacket that he stole from a guy at his party named Derek, which we never see Derek, but he's always apparently off-screen saying something that gets on Kevin's nerves. And then finally Kevin loans Steven his scarf. As such, Steven, still not knowing how to get Connie, decides to actually follow Kevin's advice, and so throughout the party, he's hanging out with Kevin as they're just trying to schmooze the other guests, and basically, as they keep socializing, Connie keeps looking over at Steven, and it's clear that she does want to talk to him. She clearly is just as nervous as Steven is, but because the pair of them are dorks, she doesn't ever approach him. And it finally starts coming to a head as through the socialization, Kevin tells Steven to just go over to Connie, say like hey to her, just play everything off, and then walk away. Which Steven does, which yeah, it doesn't really make anything better. In fact, after Steven says hi and then screws up letting her know that he thinks that she looks nice, she basically he just runs off, gets nervous, and Connie, finally just having enough of Steven not talking to her, just runs up to him and says, what is his deal? As such, she even thinks, what, are you best friends with Kevin now? And Steven says, no, you're my best friend. Hold on one second. Sorry about that, Chinny wanted to leave. But basically, yeah, Steven finally does... But yeah, basically Steven tells her, no, you're my best friend, Kevin's not my best friend, but basically it just kind of ends with Connie thinking that Steven has just moved on, doesn't want her around anymore, so she just says, I just wanted to see how you were doing, that's all, and she decides that she's just better off leaving the party. As such, Steven begins freaking out anew as he has no idea how to get his friend back, and Kevin, because Kevin's a shallow douchebag, thinks that they just broke up and so has no idea how to mend friendships, so Steven finally just goes back to plan A. Actually fucking talking to her, as he runs up to Connie as she gets on Lion's back, and before she has a chance to leave, Steven says, no, wait, Connie, please, I did miss you, I want to talk, and so from there, the pair of them finally begin exchanging words, and guess what? It works! Basically, Connie admits that she was just as much of a mess as Steven was during this whole thing. Like, she got all of his texts, she got every single word, and she did want to respond, but like Greg said, she thought she needed her space. And as such, she wanted to tell Steven, look, I can't talk to you right now. But every time she typed it up, she never sent it because she thought, no, if I did that, that would just be talking to him. And so eventually she wanted to go and talk to Steven in person and even took Lion to the temple in order to go see him, but sadly, she did that around the time when Steven, Greg, and the Gems were off vacationing, so they just missed her. And finally, that her coming to this party at all was her final attempt to try and actually see Steven. And yeah, she even, like I said, she admits just all the confused emotions in her head. Well, yeah, she was still angry at Steven for what he did, but she still missed him. She still liked hanging out with him. She wanted to talk to him. She wanted to see him in person. And even Steven admits that he understands. And he actually does what he says. He apologizes because he told her he was so worried about her being taken to Homeworld, and yet what he did was the exact same thing to her. He just went off, never considered how she would react to seeing him get taken away like that. It was stupid and selfish, and the fact that he came back and expected everything to be normal, it was wrong and stupid of him, and he apologizes for it, and it's nice. It's legitimately sweet, and ultimately Steven and Connie finally just kind of Steven and Connie, they make up as they realize they did genuinely miss each other, and they both and Steven admits his flub up. Connie talks, and yeah, to summarize, they mend the bridge. They get back together, and it's cute, adorable, and ultimately, now they've kind of fixed things, Steven abandons the getup that Kevin made for him, and they both kind of share a laugh about how both were so desperate to see the other. They not only came to Kevin's party, but in Steven's case, he took advice from him. So yeah, it's actually kind of amusing. But ultimately, Kevin just doesn't really see anywhere beyond the hand in front of his face, so he immediately thinks that, well, they're together, they can be Stevani now, right? And so he immediately tries getting the party's attention to Steven and Connie, but they think they don't need to stick around anymore, as they both get on Lion's back and say that they should probably get going since it's getting late. Of course, Kevin starts having his little tantrum as he tries to stop them, but all this earns him falling in the pool, as Connie just tells Kevin that he had a nice party, thanks for all this, but they gotta get going, and so Lion makes roars and opens a portal as they go away, while everyone looks at this and claps while the episode ends with Kevin still throwing a tantrum in the pool, even though this is probably exactly what he wanted, just minus the Bonnie, but what do you know. But yeah, those are the episodes. So first, let's talk about Sadie Killer. again, like with Dewey Wins, this one starts kind of dealing with the follow-up to what happened when Steven was brought into space. Because after all, an unintended consequence of that whole escapade was that Lars was brought with him and is sadly still stuck in space. He has, and unfortunately because of that, because of all that, he's now, well, he's basically, all of his regular obligations on Earth are not being tended to by him, and on top of that, he's left people behind. In this case, Sadie. Like I hopefully showcased in these vlogs, while Sadie and Lars weren't as close as while Sadie and Lars never really worked romantically, they were still friends, and ultimately for all the shit that Lars would put Sadie through, she did like having him around and liked hanging out with him, and ultimately not having him around as a problem, not just in a work environment but emotionally, which I think kind of explains why Sadie was so willing to kind of put up with a job she hated so much, because Sadie in the episode mentions how when she took this job, essentially she felt like she wasted her youth because she was at this dead-end job. But in a way, you can kind of see why having Lars around would make that work, because while Lars may have been a slacker and a dumbass, he at least made things interesting. He and Sadie at least could confide in one another. They could at least talk to one another. And yeah, while Lars was a shallow douchebag, at the very least, he and Sadie could still kind of connect. And having a genuine human connection can make even the most dreary and dull of scenarios that much more appealing. And I love how they showcase that in the episode, because immediately once that human factor is taken out of the equation, suddenly every single thing that makes this job hurt is just piled on top of Sadie, having to work double shift because she has no one there to work with her, having to cater to all the customers in every single regard, not having enough time for herself to the point where she's just tired all the time. Basically, without someone there to help kind of bounce all this stuff off of, like I said, she's overworked. She doesn't know what to do. And so likewise, that in that kind of environment, it's ripe for change, because everybody has a breaking point. And we see that ultimately the band that Steven and the other teens form, that becomes her outlet. In the same way that Steven happily joined the band because it gave him a place that he could just hang out and shoot the shit without having to worry about all the big emergencies and crises that he's dealt with throughout the series, which, in a way, I think is kind of exactly what the teens are advocating for in that one episode of Steven Universe when they found Steven's pod. I forget what that episode was called, apologies. In a way, it's the same case with Sadie. Because ultimately, Sadie's able to funnel all her rage and frustration into the persona of Sadie Killer, the frontliner for the band. She finally manages to find a place where she can put all of her anxiety and angers out there. And I like the way that she does it, the way she kind of slips in, because it allows her to just kind of find a healthy means for it. And from when she starts getting more into it, the more she starts to realize she likes it. And again, kind of going back to what Sadie mentioned when she talked about why she didn't want to quit the Big Donut, I kind of get that. When you fall into a pattern and fall into depression in some regards, essentially you want familiarity. There's comfort in being in an environment you're familiar with, even if you hate being in that environment, which, as I'm starting to realize, might ignore what kind of a situation I'm in. But that's personal issues that I'm not going to get into in these vlogs. My point is this: while Sadie just definitely hates the Big Donut, it's also one of the few things still consistent in her life, despite the grief it's bringing her. And just kind of with all the things going on Beach City and what happened to Lars, she just kind of wants something that she can latch onto. Unfortunately, though, that thing she's latching onto is also kind of draining her. And it's ultimately when she has that bit of freedom from joining Steven and the teens band, that makes her realize she needs this, because it's radical and different and not familiar, but it helps her. It makes her feel stronger, allows her to vent these emotions that she's feeling, and ultimately, when she realizes that it ultimately is what prompts her to decide, you know what, fuck this job, I'm gonna go do that. I like that. It's really nice, and I think it's really nice, and it helps show her character continuing to evolve, as instead of being kind of sort of the mother figure, she finds a way to she finds an outlet for emotions, because throughout the series, we've seen her frustrations kind of pile up, like when she deals with Lars's shit, or kind of dealing with the problems with her mother, when her mother gets so overbearing with her, or just having to be the voice of reason among the crazy people. And that shit can kind of mess with you mentally. So to see her finally just find a place where she can just throw all that aside and just start being as dark as she wants to be, it's nice. I like that, and it's a good. And I think what helps kind of push it further is the fact that the cherry on top was Lars being stuck in space. That was what finally kind of helped give her that extra oomph that she needed to finally step out of her comfort zone and do something crazy, which I like. I like that. It's a good development. And yeah, while the ending is a little shocking, it's also pretty nice because, yeah, the fact that Sadie joins this band does come back up later in the series, and we do see further developments on that regard and how it affects Sadie. So again, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. Like it. I love the band. I love how, and again, like with all the other Steven Universe episodes, I love the chemistry with Steven and the teens, because I love how they admire Steven's youthful optimism, and I like in the episode that they don't temper Steven's optimism, because that's part of the reason why they like him, but they also don't sugarcoat that that's not exactly the sound they're trying to look for. I especially love Buck's line when he mentions how Steven can't help being cute. I love that. It's kind of funny. So again, I legitimately liked it. So yeah, still a good episode. And it offers more character development for Sadie. It offers more development for the teens and where they're going. It has some legitimately good music with the song they create. I love the build up towards it. I still love the chemistry with Steven, Sadie, and the teens. Overall, it's a good episode, and it's a good episode, and I definitely enjoyed it. And as for Kevin Party, this one is kind of is somewhat annoying, but also cathartic. Let me put it this way. Kevin's still a douche. The episode does not sugarcoat that. Kevin is a douche still, and this episode really does not give him much more to work with in comparison to his previous two appearances in Steven Universe. But with that said, this episode also finally resolves the tension that has been existing between Steven and Connie since Steven returned from space, and it's welcome, very much welcome. While Kevin's reasons for helping Steven and Connie are ultimately selfish in the end, what I kind of like is that he is genuinely putting in the effort. Ultimately, it's a misguided effort, because all of his advice ultimately doesn't even help at all. If anything, I would argue it almost made things worse. As when Steven tried following Kevin's advice, he almost nearly pushed Connie away until he realized, no, I don't want her running away, I want to talk to her, and just finally decided to confront her, despite Kevin telling him, no, that's a bad idea, don't do that. But again, it worked. But again, I like that they actually do. So I kind of do like that little bit of Kevin actually trying to offer Steven advice. And what I like is that when he asked Steven about how bad things have gotten between him and Connie, I like that there's a bit of that. I love how he kind of tries gauging a situation based on how long it's been, how many texts have Steven sent, has she responded to anything, and so on and so forth. I do legitimately like that. But the thing is, what makes the episode emotionally cathartic is, again, it resolves the Steven and Connie plot. Like with Steven, when we the audience get excited when we hear Kevin mention that Connie is going to be at his party. And yes, while he's clearly only mentioning that to manipulate Steven, at the same time, like Steven said, he and Connie needed to talk. They needed to resolve the issues and the tensions in the air. Apologies had to be exchanged, and emotions had to be shared. And that was what we ultimately get in the episode. As when Steven and Connie finally do talk with each other, There's no yelling, there's no arguing over who was right or who was wrong. It's just them talking. And it's nice. They admit to each other how they've been feeling throughout this whole breakup, so to speak. How they both have genuinely missed one another and both have been kind of raked with turmoil, but for different reasons. Steven over the guilt of what he did to Connie and the potential sadness over what he did, and Connie likewise with having to kind of come to terms with the fact that she's not that she might need to cut out Steven for a little bit, while also trying to find a way to peacefully resolve things with him. Like she even said, she wanted to talk to Steven in person, and she tried once, but again, that happened when Steven and the Gems were off on vacation. So actually, honestly, knowing that from this episode, it irks me. Like, if they had just not gone when they did, Steven and Connie could have resolved this so much earlier. But no, because Greg and the Gems had to meddle a little, it got dragged out just a little bit more, and that annoys me. That legitimately annoyed me. But at the same time, I like the fact that when Steven and Connie start exchanging, that ultimately they both are understanding of one another, and also admit to each other that they did still want to see each other. And it's exemplified by the fact that, yeah, Steven admits that what he did was wrong. That what he did was inconsiderate when you bring Connie into this situation. Because after all, what Steven did was essentially what he was afraid of happening to Connie. That him just being brought into space and not worrying about it, and then just pretending that everything was fine when he got back. Of course Connie would react the way she did. If the situation reversed, Steven would probably be reacting the same way. Like, why would you do that? Why would you just run off like that without even thinking about us? Like, again, which even Connie could say, I did think about you, that's why I did it. But again, it might be different. It might have been different if the situations were reversed, because Steven and Connie are not the same person, but there would have still been tension, and Steven didn't consider that. But likewise again, Connie was still nervous because she did still want to see Steven and talk to him, but she also knew that in her emotional state she shouldn't see him, that she was still angry at him, and thus she needed time to process everything. I like that. It's nice. It's sweet. And when Steven and Connie finally get everything out in the open and resolve their feelings, they're just like, they feel better. They feel stronger, and it's sweet seeing them get back together. It's so adorable. These two are fucking adorable, I swear to God. And that's where the emotional catharsis comes in. It's nice to see them finally just kind of get it all out in the open, express their emotions, and actually resolve things, because guess what? That's what healthy couples do. They share. They express emotions. They talk about things that get on their nerves, but also bond over the things they still genuinely treasure with one another. And we see that with Steven and Connie here, as they both talk about what they've been going through, who screwed up and why. Apologies are exchanged on both sides, and at the end of the day, it makes them stronger. It's sweet, it's nice, and it's so good to see it finally resolved, because the whole episode really likes to keep the tension going, because guess what? Kevin is still a moron, and throughout the episode, you just see Steven just keep acting all cool and hanging out with everyone, while Connie just keeps sending looks his way, like, just, like, this is just not going to end well, and it almost didn't end well. So ultimately, while I don't hate Kevin Party, I think its biggest flaw is the build-up to the emotional catharsis, because it's irritating. While there is a part of me that likes that Kevin is legitimately trying to help Steven and Connie get back together, even if it's for selfish reasons, it at least gives him a little bit more depth than what we saw before. A little bit. Again, the whole crux of why he wants Devani there is because he wants to make his party the bomb, like I said before, and he believes that he needs Devani to do that, which is, again, stupid and vain and selfish, but whatever. But at the very least, it's nice seeing him doing more, actually trying to offer aid, even if it's bad aid. My point is, but again, just kind of the build up to that, it feels painful, and it really does feel kind of dragged out. But when you finally get to the ending, and where Steven and Connie finally just do what they should have done in the first place, actually fucking talked, it's nice, it's sweet, it's full of heart, and overall, the finale when they just ride off together while Kevin is still sulking, it's nice and amusing. On top of that, there is still some legitimately good humor in there. Again, they actually do. Again, I do like how there is some nice humor with Kevin and the off-screen character of Derek. That was actually funny, and I love just how you always hear him off-screen, but you never see him, and yet Kevin apparently has a beef with him. It's actually funny. I do like some legitimate. I do like more. I do like more of the humor connected to the party and how everything and how it goes with Steven and his attempts to look all relaxed and laid back despite the tension, and the ending where Kevin still still doesn't get what he wants, even though his party can be considered a success, considering that Magic Pink Lion. So at the end of the day, I still think it's a fine episode. Again, you gotta deal with the drudgery of having to sit through Kevin and his advice before you get to the emotional, sweet stuff that ends the storyline. But I think that ending still makes the episode worth it and enjoyable. Not great, but still good. But still good. So yeah, on the whole, Kevin Party is an alright episode. So yeah. We got Sadie Killer, which I think was pretty good, and had some good character growth for Sadie and so forth. And then likewise, we got Kevin Party, which finally wraps up the whole arc with Steven and Connie, while also giving us some good emotional catharsis in the end. So, yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you next Friday as we see Steven and Connie back together. And check back in with Lars and see how he's been doing out in space. So till then, I hope you have a good night, and as always, take care.